Hey guys, welcome back to No Casuals. I am your host, Aiden Boyer, here with
Luke in a brand new podcasting room, very professional here.
both of us in brand new podcasting rooms. His is a little nicer than mine, though, but mine has some character, and that's okay. We're just going to jump right into it. It's been a little while since the last time we hosted the show, so we're just going
Yeah.
to jump right to this week, and we're going to talk about our prospects of the night. Now, I'm going to go first and figure out how to press share screen, which I can because I'm very smart. And here it is, prospect of the night. Now, my prospect of the night is Lucien Keita. Now, let me tell you a little about Lucien Keita. Now, he is debuting against Patricio Pitbull, who is one of the biggest signings in recent UFC history, and has kind of been lukewarm in his UFC tenure thus far. And Keita is coming in on his UFC debut and fighting him. Who's Pitbull is a top 15 ranked guy in the UFC right now. Keita is coming in. He's only lost once, and that was via a leg injury, a freak injury. Everything else has been wins. Most of them have been finishes. This guy is electric. He's a big, big star in Octagon, and he's probably the best fighter we've ever seen come out of Belgium. To see him fight in the UFC now, it's long, long last. I think he's gonna dominate Pitbull. I think he's gonna finish him, knock him out. I'm very excited for Saturday's fight, Luke. What do you think about Keita?
Yeah, I'm super high on him as well. And I also think that this is a great matchup. Like Pitbull has the name value where having Kieta as this first fight, I think it's headlining the main card. It's perfect. I think he's gonna absolutely destroy him. Although Pitbull's coming off a good win, I just think there's levels, and I think Kieta's gonna come in on his UFC debut and probably get a knockout.
I completely agree, Luke. Now, tell me a little about your prospect of the night. You
Yeah.
chose Axel Sola.
Yeah, so I feel like we kind of have similar prospects. Both these guys have hype on the regional scene, both champions on the regional scene. Yours may be more decorated than mine. Axel Sola has had a little bit, some choppy moments. He's a fun striker. He has a good finishing rate. He's going up against Reese McKee, which it makes me a little bit nervous because Reese McKee has had some of the most challenging fighters. I mean, this guy's first fight in the UFC was against Chimaev, where he got submitted, but he's fought some of the best. Do I think Axel Sola has? Probably not. Do I think he's an exciting fighter who's 10 and 0, a champion on the regional scene and fits the name prospect? 100%. I'm going with him to win. I think it'll be close though. I don't think it's going to be as much as a domination as Kieta Pitbull.
I completely agree. I think Sola's a great prospect too. I think he gets past McKee. I do. Am I super sold on his long-term viability? Not necessarily.
Right, right.
There's a couple prospects that are very big on this card that we've neglected to mention that we'll talk about later on the show. But for now, I don't hate it. I think Sola does win on Saturday, and I think he is a guy to watch this Saturday night.
Yeah.
Next up on Under the Radar. Now, look, you might think, what about the main event? Now, we're going to keep you waiting. We're going to make you wait a little. We're going to build some anticipation. What do we think about the main event? What does Ted think about the main event? And Ted's talks is coming up soon. But right after that, right before that, rather, we have Under the Radar. First up on Under the Radar, Oki Walaji versus Mason Jones. You want to tell us a little bit about this fight, Luke?
Yeah, sure. Oki has always been a guy who's kind of excited me. He starts off very strong. He's very scrappy and dangerous. But one thing that I've noticed is he always he loses his steam a little bit, or he puts himself in bad positions. He got submitted by Duncan in his fight against Aswell. He did great on the feet. But he tried to work in a clinch and he started to lose the round. He ended up winning that fight though, I think. If he does the same against Mason Jones, I think he's gonna get submitted. Jones has good BGG. BJJ. He's coming off a win against Jeremy Stevens, which, isn't that impressive. He was a huge favorite going into that fight. And to be honest, that's the only fight I've really seen of his because that was his UFC debut. And I'm pretty sure he won all three rounds. This is a close fight, in my opinion. Both these guys have passed the victory. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Mason Jones by sub.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a fascinating matchup because Oki Balaji has looked very good in the UFC and he's fought great guys and lost to them, right? Chris Duncan is not a bad loss at all.
No.
Mason Jones in a similar boat. He's 16 and 2. He's been in the UFC twice, but the first time he ran against a bunch of really high level opponents and lost to all of them. His second tenure, he fought Jeremy Stevens, who's not nearly at that level, and dominated him through 3 rounds in an absolute barn burner and got multiple ones on the Cage Warriors. I'm leaning towards Oki Balaji here at plus money, but I think this fight should be close as it is in Vegas. It's a great fight. It should be phenomenal. These are two good, genuine prospects at lightweight, two guys that could maybe make the rankings in a couple years that I'm really excited to see fight in a pretty big spot here as the featured bout of this card in Paris.
Yeah.
Next, Omar Sy versus Brenson Ribeiro. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this fight and the reason why Sy is a minus $400 favorite is because Sai's only lost once, and that's Alonzo Menifield, who I think is very underrated at light heavyweight. Brenton Rivera, on the other hand, is very hit and miss. On his best days, he can beat most guys. On his worst days, he's the worst fighter in the UFC kind of guy. Where Sai has been significantly more consistent, beating a significantly higher caliber opponent, and he's fighting at home. This is totally a showcase for him. This is his moment, and I'm just underlining this fight specifically because Omar Sy is a name that you need to pay attention to in the future of the light heavyweight division, even after the somewhat frustrating loss to Alonzo Menifield we saw earlier.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I feel like that loss was so frustrating because I was high on Cy, and then he has one of the most like low output losses to Menafield, which I understand that is, very technical strikers, and I think it's kind of a similar, Ribeiro is also really good striking, but I agree that this is positioned so that Omar Sy can get the win and at the home crowd and boost him to a higher ranking.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, we have Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delia. Now, I'm going to talk a little about Delia, but I'm going to let you talk about Tybura, Luke.
Yeah.
You've seen him fight.
Yes, bro. We saw Tibera versus Denise where he was ruthlessly elbowing him in the face and there was blood everywhere. Listen, Tibera is underrated in my opinion. He's lost to only the best of the heavyweight division, right? Okay, he lost to Spivak, but that's probably a stylistic nightmare for him. But other than that, he lost to Volkov and Aspinall. Like people don't really talk about the fact that Tibera he's super skilled and he's only lost to the best. The last time that Tybura fought, I know you want to talk about Delagio, but the last time Tybura fought someone out of Aspinall's gym, it was Mick Parkin, and he beat him pretty convincingly. I'm pretty sure that Ante also trains out of Aspinall's gym. Um, maybe it doesn't mean anything, but I put the two and two together just right now, and I was like, yeah, maybe it means something. Maybe he figured out, that gym's way of training heavyweights.
Well, I don't think he did because Tom Aspinall did knock him out in 2 minutes. But Ante Delia is an interesting guy to look at because he's a former PFL champion. He was a guy that we've been talking about for years. Is like the UFC should sign him soon. The UFC should sign him soon. Since before COVID, since before Fight Island, even we've been talking about Ante Delia as this guy of a guy who's just at the perimeter, a guy who's just outside of the rankings, a guy who could make some noise in the UFC. And Tibera is sort of the stalwart of the division. He's one of the best gatekeepers we've ever seen in the history of the heavyweight division. And we've got a guy who's not a prospect because of his age, but is a known variable, a guy who's always been a what if in the UFC coming in and testing a guy who's a better. This is a classic matchup. We see this all the time. We're seeing it on this card in other places like we did with Patricio Pitbull versus Lucian Keita. However, I'm leaning towards Tybura here. I like Delhi as a prospect. I think he's a good fighter. I think he's gonna give Tybura many problems. But Tybura is very underrated. He's very consistent. He always finds a way to win. And unless you're a guy like Tom Aspinall, a guy like Curtis Blades, a guy like one of these elite fighters in the division, I'm sorry, but Tybura is probably gonna beat you. He
Yeah,
beats most of the guys that aren't gonna end up becoming champions or title contenders, and I don't see that for Ante Delhi at this point in his career.
yeah, I agree.
Next up, Andreas Gustafsson versus Hanat Bakradinov. Now, talk to me about this fight, Luke, because this fight is very exciting to me.
Yeah, Gustin, he's coming off a super dominant win against Chaos Williams, and that's kind of what makes this fight exciting, in my opinion. Also because Renat Fakhretdinov has one of the best like records at welterweight. But the only thing that I think changes this fight is that Fakhretdinov is coming off of one of the biggest robberies of the past year, right? Where Carlos Leal, where he beat him, he was in the home crowd. And for some reason, the judges scored him winning that fight. I scored it completely different.
I did too.
But he has a great record. I think he's not that dangerous. I think he's more of a point fighter. He wins most of his fights by decisions. He's not exciting. Whereas you have someone like Gustafsson who has this reckless style, relentless pressure. His cardio is absolutely insane. And I think he wins because of that. I think he's going to be all in Renat's face. I have him winning a unanimous decision. I don't think it'll be too challenging for him.
Look, I see where you're coming from. I think this fight is much more competitive than the UFC record would suggest. Fardino having, like, I believe, like an 8-0-1 record in the UFC
Yeah.
and Gustafsson being 1-0. I think this fight is very close, but I do see a path to victory for Fakhretdinov. I think Fakhretdinov's wrestling is just phenomenal. And the way that Gustin pressures, when he can take him down on the lead foot, Gustin's going to blitz in, throw a bunch of crazy overhands like he does. Fakhretdinov's going to go right underneath that, take him down, and control him in the way that he always does. Now, we forget that Fakhretdinov is the only man in the UFC to beat Brian Battle, a guy who beat Brandy Brown, a guy who beat a bunch of other legitimate contenders. And Fakhretdinov beat him. Fakhretdinov beat almost everybody. It was Facundo drew the Elijah dos Santos, who's one of the best unranked welterweights in the division.
Yeah.
I think Facundo is genuinely the best unranked fighter, maybe in the UFC, especially at welterweight. However, this matchup is stylistically targeted to make him lose. The UFC does not want Facundo to be good. He's not exciting. He doesn't have fans. He barely wins his fights. So they're giving him a guy that stylistically should win. But I think that Facundo fundamentals are just too good. I've got him out Facundo taking this one by a 30-27 decision in an absolute snooze fest, but one that gets in the top 15.
All right.
Next up, Cowboy Fernandez versus Harry Hardwick. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this fight. Hardwick is taking this fight on 4 or 5 days' notice. He was a
Yep.
Cage Warriors champion at featherweight, and this fight is at lightweight against a very good prospect. And Fernandez coming off a win over Guram Kudaladzej. Now, who have you got in this one, Luke, and how have you got him winning it?
Yeah, so like you said, Hardwick taking this on short notice. Props to him. He was a former champ, super high pace and exciting, and he can grapple. You know, he is taking this fight on short notice against Fernandez, who's fought probably much tougher opponents. His most recent win was against Kutaladze, where he got a unanimous decision. And if I remember correctly, Hazmat and Ilya were in his opponent's corner, which is that's pretty scary. So he got that done regardless. And he's a clean kickboxer. I can't pick a regional fighter debut on short notice. It's feels too risky. So I'm gonna go for that reason. I'm gonna go Fernandez by KO. I don't see the odds, but um, I would assume that Fernandez is probably a slight favorite.
He's a decent favorite. Yeah, the
Yeah.
odds aren't up because they haven't been released in Vegas, but on verdict, I believe he's +4. Hardwick is.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I'm not gonna lie, I've got Hardwick in this one. To put it simply, I mean he's for a regional fighter, he's as credentialed as they come. He's a multiple-time Cage Warriors champion at featherweight. He's one of the best Cage Warriors fighters we've ever seen. I mean, yeah, he's moving up a weight class. Yeah, it's a short notice fight, but he was already in camp. He's fighting a guy in Fernandez who, yes, beat Kudaladzej, but not in the and beat him well, but has not impressed me too much into the UFC. And a guy in Hardwick that's really been a guy that I've liked to see fight in the UFC for a long time. A guy who's more than capable of fighting an average UFC featherweight. Now he's fighting an above average UFC lightweight, which makes it a little harder, but I've got Hardwick and I've got him doing it by decision, a barn burn of a fight. Both these guys can swing, and Hardwick always brings the pressure. He's going to be a big star in the UFC, but I think he takes this one. I think he takes it by unanimous decision 29-28 and on three judges' scorecards.
Okay.
Next, our co-main event.
Oh,
Anthony
excited for this one.
Mauricio Hufi. Now, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know if I need to say anything about these fighters. These
I
guys are
don't even know if we need to
exciting
say
fighters
much.
in the UFC, and they're not even in the main event, which makes this even more unbelievable. I'll just give you my pick. I've got Hoofy taking it by knockout. Now look, something he's a great fighter. He's still very good. But his fight against Renato Moicano just baffled me. And I know that Hoofy's not going to wrestle him. He's going to strike with him. But the fact that there's such a clear game plan to beating Santini after the Dos Santos loss, after the loss to Poirier after the loss. Now to Moicano, it's so what you beat Kyle Prepelic on short notice, and yes, you dominantly beat him, but you beat him on short notice.
Mm.
Hoofy's not going to get taken down by Santini, and on the feet, I think Hoofy is just strictly a better fighter. And now the grappling makes it interesting. If Hoofy's able to get taken down, Santini has a lot of paths to victory, but I don't see that happening. So for that reason, I've got Mauricio Hoofy by knockout in the second round.
Yeah, I'll go even a little bit bolder. I think probably the first round he'll find the knockout. And this is strictly because Rufi has never struggled with takedown defense. So he'll keep the fight standing and he'll find the knockout. The last time Benoit Saint-Denis was in Paris, we saw what happened. I think it'll probably be an even more dominant fashion.
I completely agree. And we're running through this card. Unfortunately, it's a fight night, so there's not too much to elaborate on. But this is a very good fight night, guys. At home, if
Very
you're
good.
watching, if you're bored on Saturday, watch this fight card. This is a very good introduction to the sport. People that aren't super familiar, the crowd's gonna be insane. The Parisian crowds are very fun. But with that said, we're gonna move on to our main event. But first, a message from our guest, Ted Linden. If you don't know, Ted talks to the show where Ted gives his takes on the best and the worst of the UFC as well as the main event. Now, I believe I didn't watch the full video, but I believe he's talking about our main event, and I hope so because if it is true, it makes our podcast segue much easier.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TED Talks. Welcome back to No Casuals. I'm here to give you guys my take on UFC Paris, which goes down this Saturday against Nassourdine Imavov and Kyle. I'm not even going to try and say his last name because I'm going to screw it up. Anyways, This is a good fight, and especially because the middleweight division is really stacking up, and especially the top five. After this fight goes down, this is kind of going to paint a good picture of what the middleweight division is going to look like in the next coming years, but especially for the rest of this year. Both fighters are going to call out Khamzat after their victory. That's another conversation. Anyways, I think this is going to be a very good fight. I think my official take, I'm going to say right now, is KO by round two knockout. KO by round two TKO. Um, I want to talk a little bit about how Imavov, after his knockout victory against Adesanya, it made him a bigger name and it made him a higher level fighter in a sense. But I think Kaio, stylistically and technically, is a better fighter, especially when he looks for openings. I think he's going to find Imavov's chin. He's gonna crack his chin late in the second round. I'm envisioning it. I'm back to hot takes here. You heard it here first. Kaio by round two TKO. UFC Paris this Saturday. As always, my friends, I'm Ted. This has been TED Talks, and that's my take. Back to you guys.
Very interesting.
Okay, what do you think about that, Luke?
Well, I
In Vegas, the
actually
odds are
think out
very
of
close on
all
this
of
card.
Kaio's, what's that?
Well, the odds are almost even on this card. If you look at if you
Yeah.
look at Vegas, they're almost even.
Yeah. Honestly, I think out of all of Kyle's paths to victory, maybe knockout's one of the most riskier ones to pick. Especially against someone who's as dangerous of a striker as Imavov, which he's proved. I mean, he's being probably one of the best strikers at middleweight, in his most recent win. So I think for the fact that this is a number one contender fight, neither of these guys have like super impressive resumes. Um, okay, I think Imavov's probably edges out Kaio's by since because of that name value of the Adesanya win and because he knocked him out. But Kaio, on the other hand, feels like he's like a step behind. Like Imavov is younger than him, but for some reason, Kaio feels like he is the guy who still hasn't proved himself, and he's still looking for some sort of highlight win that would elevate him to the talks of like, okay, this guy can stand with Hamzat and maybe pose a challenge for him. And he's coming off a unanimous decision against Cannonier. Prior to that, KO of Paul Craig, which is just like welcome to the club. And I think a disadvantage that a lot of people aren't talking about is that Kyle weighed in at 185 2.5 weeks ago. And at that point, Imavov was probably 20 to 30 pounds over that weight and comfortably sitting there. So as long as Imavov has good defense, he can pick apart Kyle in the feet. I think, and I have my phone somewhere because the last two times on this podcast, he has never let me down. I have the receipts to prove it if my camera can focus on it. Maybe not. But I picked
I can't. I don't know.
Imavov to knock out Adesanya. I picked Imavov to knock out Cannonier. I'm picking Imavov to knock out Kyle Berhalo, and I know this will upset Aiden, and I know this will upset Ted, but he's never given me a reason to doubt him.
Just for the record, we're picking someone that has the earliest stoppage in UFC history at UFC Louisville. We're picking someone.
Against Cannonier?
It's Cannoneer. We're picking
Yeah,
someone who got knocked out. Who got lost to
yes, it
Sean
was.
Strickland. We're picking someone who barely got past the middleweight Joaquin Buckley, and we're picking him against a guy who has never lost in the UFC, a guy who finishes almost all of his fights except for the Cannonier fight, one that which he was tested, went to the wire with Cannonier and was able to find nearly a finish in the fifth. We're talking about a guy in Kai Bahia who trains out of the arguably the best rising gym in the sport right now. We're talking about a guy in Kai Bahia who is the leader of the Fighting Nerds, a team where he's surrounded by killers against a guy who's coached by a guy who's notoriously a terrible coach within the sport. What are we talking about here? What we're talking about is we're talking about an
Yeah.
easy domination for Kaya Bahia. We're talking about a round three submission because Imavov has none of the grappling defense. If you watch his fight against Brendan Allen, Imavov barely wins it, and Brendan Allen would get squashed by Kyle Bahia. We're talking about something that is just is unfathomable to me. The fact that Imavov does anything to Kyle. Now look, Imavov has good wins, and he's a good fighter. He is. But it seems like a Buckley situation where his best win is an old Adesanya. He's fighting older guys. He's got a really luxurious path to the title. And Bahia has wins over Mikhailo Jacek, a guy who's completely turned his camp around. I don't see it any other way, but I see a finish for Kyle Bahia in Paris, one that cements him as the number one contender and one that eventually makes him a UFC champion when he beats Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah, I mean, I knew you were gonna say something like this. And I faced almost probably worse backlash for when I picked Imavov to KO Adesanya. Thankfully, I'm pretty sure that footage got lost or something. But
I don't know. I don't know about what files.
okay, there you go. I've been high on Imavov. You know that I think he's an underrated striker, and I think this fight is unbelievably close. I think it's probably as close to a 50-50 number one contender fight as we have ever. You know what I mean? This is very close. But I think Imavov he's gonna stand and he's gonna get the KO. I think it's gonna happen. I really do.
With that being said, it's time to wrap up this episode. What time to wrap this episode? It's just time because the show's called No Casuals, and we just can't
Oh,
have this. We can't have casuals on the show anymore.
all right, bro. All right.
So,
So
with
be it.
that in mind, so be it. With that in mind, it's been great having you, Luke. I always love doing the show. We don't do it enough. We'll do it next week as well because there's
Yes, we have so
another
many banger fight
phenomenal.
nights.
The next 6 weeks are all great fight nights. So you're gonna be seeing a lot of us. Okay.
Yep.
But with that, Kyle Bahayo, get ready for his match against Khamzat Chimaev and then make the match next week. And outside of that, I'll see you next week.
All right, everyone tune in for Imavov's KO.